how many times do I get people going, how do I motivate my team? Okay. I'm taking your course because I want to motivate my team. And I'm like, oh, honey, motivation does not come from outside. It comes from inside. Going right back to the project one. Next one, group performance is declining. I remember this one case where I had a young hire, and we brought her on, and the first 4 months she was performing so well. By month 5, her performance completely declined. Why? Because she had a whole new vision for her life, going back to project one, right? Element one. She had a whole new dream that came on board, which she didn't share with us. So all of a sudden she was bored. She was demotivated. Team erosion, another quick story. I had this person in Vancouver and a person in Toronto. We brought them together for typical team events, meetings, and they were great together in person. But as soon as they went back to their respective cities, it was like oil and water. And what happened there was a lot of team erosion happening simply because we didn't design a communication culture that was effective. And we had to really look at how we were intentionally building our culture in that case. So whenever you see your performance personally or team declining, you see demotivation, you see people doing this a lot, that kind of thing. Watch out for that, because I think those are examples of indicators of a lack of intentional culture. Culture happens whether or not you're intentional about it. So you might as well start to build some intention into it. Over to you, Jim. Do you have an example of some pain points that I haven't spoken to for element 2?
Well, certainly organizations talk about turnover and recidivism and absenteeism, that sort of thing, that can be rampant, and the numbers can be really frightening. I think all of it boils down to that culture of being respected for who you are, being appreciated for who you are and what you bring to the table, and being able to work with notions like integrity and trust and respect, that sort of thing. So when you talk about a communication culture a few minutes ago, communication goes well beyond just responding to questions that you're asked. Communication needs to be not only open, but thorough and complete. And there needs to be a bravery in communication to be able to talk about the difficult topics, to not let them just slide under the rug. And to raise particular issues. Again, the psychological safety thing that we talk about. That culture can and should be cultivated. Like you say, Rose, your team will develop a culture whether you do it intentionally or not. And if you don't do it intentionally, the culture is going to be the ad hoc collection of misfit behaviors that you bring from your past experiences. And the chances of that gelling into a high-performing culture, a high-performing team, I think is pretty well nil. So we need to, when we talk about leaders need to appreciate that that's a critical element in having a high-performing team. And they need to provide the space, not the space where they say, this is the culture that we're going to have here, but the space where the team participates in designing the culture that's going to work best for them. And when you talked about culture fit versus culture add, that's where the culture add, I think, is critical, because when they're participating in creating the space, they can give their flavor to the culture. There's so much about diversity and inclusion these days, and a lot of people still aren't really clear on the concepts. Inclusion is embracing the things that you're different than I am about, embracing that as adding, as an additive kind of element, so that it becomes our superpower, to be truly inclusive, to be able to take everybody's contributions, and we're all different than other people in many different ways, getting beyond mere tolerance and or even accepting that they'll be in the same room, but embracing that and loving that diversity as being something that really makes us stronger as a group, and cherishing that, bringing that out, building that into the culture. And that's something that is very, very much like the charter. It's something that starts on day one of the project and isn't done until we disband the team, if we ever do.
And we in my how we sometimes do this in my world is we actually have discussions. We have team agreements as to how we want to work culture through a project. Now, I think a challenge, and I can hear one of my devils on my shoulder saying, yeah, but cultures it starts with the organization, not on my project, and there's nothing I can do about my organizational culture. And I know we do attend to some of this in the course, but I still, and I have experienced this, when I'm given a project, no matter what the culture of the organization is, and this is going to be a little bold and audacious as a statement, but my experience has shown that the projects that my teams are involved in, we have the opportunity to recalibrate some of that culture and intentionally work a little bit different culture in that little sphere that I'm given. So I have this one story. This was about a decade ago, and was brought in on a project. It was falling off track. It's one of the things I love to do, is to help recalibrate teams and projects back on. And then I go, bye, because my job is to hopefully empower that team with skills so that they can take it forth. Totally. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. In 90 days, I inherited a project team of about 30 people. And in 90 days, not only did we recalibrate the project, but we accomplished what the objective was. But the funny thing wasn't so much the objective win. For me, the joy was in how we built this cultural piece, how we worked together, how we behaved together, how we communicated together on a day-to-day basis. We literally had people knocking on our project door every week. I had people coming up to the door going, I hate the rest of this organization. I literally cannot stand working with the rest of these people. Can I please get in on your project? And, we did a few things in there to foster that culture. So to those people who say to me, oh, there's no way you can affect a culture of an organization by, from within, I call on that. I say, I have seen many examples of where what you do, and even as a leader, let's say the team culture is kind of starting to go down. So then that comes back to number one. Go back to number one. Start with yourself, because how you are as a leader completely influences your team. Going back to something else you said, Jim, around communication. And I was struck by this quote because it's something that I struggle with and have struggled with for years. And thanks to people like yourself and to some other colleagues and mentors, somebody taught me the rule of 3 to 1 when I'm in that position of leadership. And they said, look, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. At least use those in proportion. And that got me laughing, because as a cultural example of activating a culture of inclusion and listening, actively listening, and not just to what the words are being said. I have some hearing loss, and that's what I realized about myself. Was like, oh, I'm having actual trouble hearing. Like, okay, that's what might be going on. But once I experienced that for the first time, I had to listen and watch people's mouths. I had to start going, okay, what are they saying? And then I was struck with another thing. People don't often remember what you say, but they sure remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And to me, when we are holding something as simple as a 15-minute kickoff on a Monday morning, as a leader, I pay attention to that. I'm like, I've got to pay attention to what is the emotional quotient that we are leaving this meeting with. So if you leave a meeting and you're like, oh, it was so either boring, or I feel attacked, or if you've got all these negative emotions at the end of a meeting, there's got to be a way to calibrate that. And so one of the things I do is I take people aside one-on-one. I'm like, how'd that go? Like, I feel like something was off there, like take them aside and have the conversation. Don't let that fester from a 0 to 10. Don't let it go above that 5. Take them aside and find a way to go for coffee. I do tea breaks on Zoom now. I literally schedule tea breaks with people and go 15 minutes, or on the phone. Let's just do tea. Let's talk. Human beings. Making time, going back to what you're just saying, make space for that. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that making space, there was other things I was going to say, but making space really opens up something for me that's really important, because a lot of the things that we talk about in this workshop are things that are seen as in addition to the project work. And you get a lot of pushback from that. People say, I'm already slammed with all the stuff I've got to do. I don't have time to sit together and build a team agreement or any of those things. And I would argue that if you did proper cost accounting, you'd realize you don't have time not to do these things, because all of the issues that we talk about on projects, whether that's turnover, recidivism, or low morale or poor quality on a project, whatever you want to do, you can figure out a way to monetize them, even roughly. And you would find there's a stat somewhere that says somewhere around 40 or 50% or more of all your project costs go into this bucket of these inefficiencies because we're not working well together. So when you say that you don't have time to get together to talk about what's a culture that's going to make us more effective, to help us be more efficient, to bring out our best on projects, when you weigh that time against the time that you're going to waste if you don't do that, then the things that we're talking about here are investments to make the project more efficient, more effective, more enjoyable for everybody on the project. These are not costs at all, but these are actually the precursors to running an effective project that are absolutely essential.
I do have stats. We're actually going to put together a set of stats so people can have the evidence that they need to be able to understand how to put time into this and why to put time into this and where to put the time in. 2 words that come to mind as you were just speaking there: the culture of accountability and acknowledgement. I use those 2 words every day in my world. So when I have a team member, that includes myself, when I have a team member who has shown up and provided something and done something really good, I underline and acknowledge it specifically. Like one of our teammates here, Rachel, she just delivered today a fantastic set of graphics, and she took the initiative and did it, and I replied right away. And again, our culture is when there is something that somebody has done that is effective, on point, within our charter, so to speak, and also within our goals for that week, we acknowledge it. We call it out. We call out the successes. And that's another thing people don't do within the culture. It's like, don't just let success, and also don't do the fake thing. Oh, thank you, team, for all your hard work. Please don't do that. Your team does not want to hear that. Okay. Because if you're not specific, if you don't acknowledge specifically what I do, like in an email, Jim, if you're doing something that's super like kudo worthy and in front of a group of people via email, the only time I use the words I and you on a team thing is when I am calling you out on a good thing, on something you've done well. When I'm actually saying, Jim, thank you so much for that stats on cost savings when projects install intentional culture leadership as a mindset. So when I specifically acknowledge what you have done in a team, and then the flip side, though, is also accountability and having a safe way and a real way of an accountable culture. Because I think also sometimes people think that what we're talking about here is all like, oh, everybody just be nice to each other. okay, yeah, I kind of do think you kind of need to be nice to each other. There's got to be respect on a team. Absolutely. But respect is earned, and it's earned over time. And trust is not just something we give out on a team. It's something that is a result of things like, we hit our objectives. Thank you, Jim. You delivered that report on time. I can trust you now. So trust is built over these times. So
Yeah.
when I say accountability, I think one thing I would challenge people to think about is in their intentional culture design as a team, have a discussion as to how you want to share accountability, like how you want to practice accountability, and also how you want to practice acknowledgement, because that is another missing within that intentional culture. And the reason I'm coming here, Jim, is because again, sometimes people think, oh, you're speaking these unicorn kind of dreams of like, inclusivity and diversity and all these buzzwords. Hell no. No, 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 no. We are talking about really having the hard talks about what that actually means in our every single day with your team. So bring them in on that discussion. Don't assume it. You've got to get them involved in that as early as possible.